strong church community. On the one hand, the church community sounds like the gardener. They say, no, don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. In fact, these people were explicitly called to their congregations to save the tree. But it's not really the voice of the gardener, because on the other hand, they're told, just don't go digging around the roots too much, if you don't mind. Don't go messing with the tree. Just leave it alone. Let's just hope that next year it gets better. Don't add any manure. Let's just do what we have always done and magically hope that things will turn around. But go back to the parable for a minute. It's not the deal, is it? The deal is, let's try some radical husbandry on this tree. And radical comes from the root. Radical means root. And if it doesn't bear fruit, it's got to go. It's withering. Here's the deal. It's one or the other. Cut it down or do some very deep work on it. The owner is not prepared to preside over a slow death. Notice that. He's not saying, poor thing, we're going to have to just let it sit there year after year after year until the last drop of life has drained out of this pathetic excuse for a tree. And the gardener isn't exactly romantic about it either. She's prepared to go to work and support the life that's still left in the tree in order to see if it can rejuvenate the whole tree. But she's not prepared to preside over a protracted dying process. I think this is a great call for the church in the 21st century in Canada. Great parable. Very apt. So my role with these willing gardeners was to help them, support them to go to their constituency with their strong gardener voice. Lay out the terms of the deal. Here's the deal. You get one or you get the other. And I'm not interested in some hybrid thing. That was basically my role, because there's a lot of fear in leadership at this time. So I was just saying, where's that authoritative voice inside of you? And I offered a few gardening tips. And can you guess where I got those tips from? I can't tell you how crucial it was to these leaders to know that a congregation exists, that we're prepared to do some sort of radical digging, to get to the root of the problems, to try out some new gardening techniques, and by God's grace find itself bearing fruit. So I could go with them with injunctions. I could say, I'm not asking you to do anything here that we haven't tried. It's like a scientific injunction. Try this, and if you try this, this is our experience, this happens. Very powerful for them, very hopeful for them. And I can't tell you how many of them came up to me and said, when you go back, please thank your congregation for freeing you up to be able to be with us. And so I offer that thanks on behalf of those 35 or 40 gardeners. In this orchard called the United Church of Canada, it's incredibly important to be able to offer examples of congregations that have consented to root surgery, to developing new practices and processes which got the sap flowing again. And I personally want to thank you for being that kind of congregation too. It's just such a pleasure, and I shared this with them, that I love my work at Canadian Memorial. They need to hear that too, because they themselves are like a withered fig tree, right? They're exhausted with this. So I said, it's possible to serve congregations where you love your work, friends. I love working in this congregation. I love these people. Because over the last 13 years or so of our life together, you've shown that you understand the deal. And my assessment right now is that we are indeed harvesting abundance. So it's a pleasure. And today at our congregational meeting, we take our next step. We vote on our new purpose to teach and practice an evolutionary Christian spirituality. And when I share this with these folks at Calling Lakes Retreat Center, they can hardly believe it. They say, well, how'd you get to that place? But it's interesting, isn't it? Because this parable of the gardener is all about growth. Not just in numbers, not just bums in the seat, but growth, development in body, soul, mind, spirit. Growth in what it means to be in authentic relationships in community. Growth in the willingness to grow in compassion for the suffering in all creation. So to embrace an evolutionary Christian spirituality is, by definition, to organize around those practices and those processes that encourage growth, the health of the tree. We're going to recover ancient practices and bring them forward. And we're going to discover new practices that help us to bear fruit year after year after year. And since God is known and experienced in and through evolutionary dynamics, both in the natural world and in human culture, we're going to align ourselves with this sacred dynamic power. So we can think of the voice of the gardener in the parable as the voice of the Christ, speaking to us at precisely those moments when we've given up hope in ourselves and in our communities of faith. It's Christ's voice, all right, speaking to us from the future that needs us in order to be born, speaking to us also from the past, our roots that reach down deep into the soil of our tradition. Speaking to us now, in this moment, as the sap of the evolutionary impulse to keep growing, keep evolving, to bear fruit, to be God's people in the world and for the world. By God's grace, our fruit-bearing, friends, has just begun. Amen.